Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for this session today, where we're going to talk about PXM maturity. And so right away, let's get into what is PXM, or Product Experience Management. Well, it is a set of best practices that brings together the art and science of technology, people, and process to help organizations be able to deliver product experiences across any channel that they do business with, whether that's sales or marketing with their customers. My name is Ali Hanyololu. I'm the Senior Director of Product Marketing at Akeneo, and I'm going to be your host for this session today. But with me is Amanda Leclerc from Forrester, who we worked with for this particular study that we're going to talk about in this session today. So hi, Amanda. Thank you for joining us. If you could quickly introduce yourself, that would be great.
Yeah, hi, Aline. Thank you for having me. Hi, everyone. I'm a senior analyst at Forrester Research, and I am our lead analyst covering product information management, and very excited to share the results of this study and talk about what's such an important topic today.
Excellent. So glad you're here. So let's start by talking about PXM maturity, and specifically, Akeneo has something called the PXM maturity model. So real quickly, what is this all about? Well, PXM maturity model is a very simple framework that allows organizations out there to identify the path or journey that they need to take with respect to their maturity around product experience management. And it is broken down into three areas. You're an adopter, which means you're getting started with technology, moving into an innovator, where you're starting to bring in together people and process, to a champion, where you're taking these best practices both within and outside of your organization with your business partners, for example. Now, I won't go into the details of each specific area. There's lots of information out there that you can find that. But why do we do this? Essentially, it allows organizations to see the steps that they can take next in order to improve their maturity over time. It's not something that you can do in one go, and you don't want to boil the ocean, that's for sure. How is it used? In many different ways. For example, we use it with our customers to identify where they are today and where they could potentially go next. We work with them to identify improvements in how they can use a technology, or maybe add to it, or who else they can include within PXM as a set of best practices in order to expand their usage of the technology in order to deliver those great product experiences. Now, we want to explore maturity across a wider range of people in the industry, across different demographics as well. And that's why we worked with and commissioned Forrester to conduct this study and report on their findings and give us some key insights into where the industry is at and their recommendations for where people can go. So Amanda, can you tell us a little bit more about that study, please?
Yeah, so I exactly aligned to the setup. It was great to be able to work with Akeneo to develop this study, to take that broader look on really a targeted audience of who we could survey, to look at what's changing and other elements that might need to be added based on where we're at to that PXM maturity model. So back in May, working with the Forrester Consulting group, we conducted a research study that was survey-based to understand how product data, product content tools, and the processes impact on engaging and contextualized customer experiences through the practice of product experience management. And we used that also study to embed an updated maturity model into that survey to take a look at some of the things that are changing, and then also gauge and get some benchmarks on where PXM maturity stands today. So this study included 452 global strategy decision makers for this topic. And in a minute, I'll show you exactly what that looks like from a demographics perspective. But we had a very healthy sample here of both IT and marketing roles with responsibility for what we define as constituting PXM.
Now, one thing you mentioned there is that Forrester also has a maturity model, maturity framework. Could you tell us a little bit about how, or what that is, and how it maps to Akeneo's one a little bit?
Yeah, so for any maturity model that Forrester does, we're never just looking at the technology itself. We're looking at technology, metrics, strategy, the organization structure, and people and collaboration practices. So as we were going through and collaborating to update that maturity model, we were looking at how those dynamics come together as a means of updating the PXM maturity model. And so we did apply that to more specifically the process and practice of product information management and product experience management, and looked at really the specifics around what collaboration looks like around product information in PXM, what the right data management practices and metrics are, what the overall enterprise-wide strategy is, and applied that to the maturity model. And so what we found, and there's a lot more in the study that will be published alongside of this, is that the breakout of the levels of maturity, roughly 36% still fell into those PXM adopters phase, that early stage, lower maturity phase. 33%, exactly 1/3, were in somewhere in the middle, the PXM innovators in between high maturity and low maturity, and 31% were what Akeneo refers to as the PXM leaders, who are really at the forefront of combining strategy with their technology investments, with the way they enable their teams to collaborate, with the metrics they use to evaluate and optimize PXM compared to the overall peer set that we looked at.
Yep. I love the fact that it's actually even, so we get a good look at the different levels of maturity there. Now, tell us a little bit more about the demographics of who you surveyed for this study.
So the survey was global in nature. We had the primarily respondents, or the bulk of the respondents, 40%, came from the US, but we also had respondents from the UK, Germany, France, and Canada. We didn't do too much on the sizing. We opened it up for companies that had at least 500 million in annual revenue. Like I said earlier, we had a really great distribution of folks representing various product data needs and priorities across IT, which made up 36% of the sample, product, 33% of the sample, and marketing or advertising, which made up 31% of the sample. We also, I was excited to see, had a very senior level of respondents. That goes to show that PXM is a top line business initiative, business priority. 44% of the respondents were C-level, while about 29% were vice president and 28% the director level. And again, we didn't narrow down too much on the industries because PXM, product information management, is becoming such a hot topic across many industries. We had respondents that represented tech and tech services, electronics, financial services, retail, construction, healthcare, CPG, manufacturing materials. So we had a very healthy set of industry priorities, industry kind of current state of PXM represented in the sample as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I'm fortunate in that I get to have an early look into the study and the data and the report itself. And Amanda, if you and I were to cover all of the great insights that are in there, we'd have a Netflix series, I think. So we've only got a little bit of time today. So we've picked 3 of some of the key insights that we found from the study. And I want to jump right away into the first key finding. And this is one that you and I were calling product data takes the center stage. And it touches a little bit on what you were just saying about the level of the individuals within the study. So tell us a little bit more about this one.
Yeah, I think that this key finding is best demonstrated by one of the data points we got back. And again, thinking back that we had 40+% of the respondents at the C level, that 77% of the respondents agreed that their organization's senior leadership recognizes the impact of product data on top line business initiatives. And so this is something I think we feel right in the client conversation, certainly where I get inquiries coming in. There's the undercurrent of, we know that this is important, but it's not always clear how it's tied to what an executive might care about. We don't hear executives often talking about product data, product insights at the level that they do customer insights, for example. And certainly in the early days of digital transformation, so much focus And certainly from the Forrester point of view of the interpretation of the age of the customer was, what do the customers actually interact with? And those were the technologies, those were the touch points where the majority of investments were focused on. I think we've seen, as we've seen with a lot of technology cycles, this recognition that you can't deliver great customer experiences if you don't have the back end support to fuel those experiences. And I think that the product information, because we're all consumers, whether we're wearing our business hats or in our personal lives, we can all relate to those experiences where you've ordered something online and it's not what you expected. You may have this at work where you were expecting something and there's supply chain issues and you're pulling your hair out because there's a broken product experience somewhere along that route. So what we're seeing is that bubble up in the enterprise and the recognition that product information, to use an overused and perhaps cliche analogy here, is really one of the fuel sources for customer experiences. You can't deliver a basic customer experience if you're not providing consumers with the accurate, complete, and quality data that they need to become the experts in their own purchasing journeys. So yeah. I love that this data point represents that we are seeing, and we've got the data to back up, that product information is finally taking a more center stage role alongside customer information and really being able to execute those top line business initiatives like growing revenue, reducing costs, and certainly improving customer experiences.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you on everything there. And I think many senior leaders within organizations are acknowledging that the product experience is the first touch point that their customers are going to have with their brand. And therefore, the product information needs to reflect their brand as well. It is how they are marketing and communicating to their customers. And every executive out there is going to take their brand perception very seriously. And therefore, they're realizing, yes, the product story and the product data that we have is a key part of that. It needs to be done really well. I think another thing is, if we start to look a little bit more forward, as we head into a period of economic uncertainty, many of these brands and manufacturers and retailers and distributors, they acknowledge that they need to stand out because their customers in a period of economic uncertainty are going to become more choosy. And so they need to be competitive and stand out and get business when and where they can. And so with that in mind, they're also acknowledging that, yes, we need to be getting the right technologies, but putting the right people and process in place in order to be able to deliver on that too. The other thing is they want their teams to be as productive as possible. And so anything that they can leverage that will measure that productivity and see it have an impact on their business is going to be more strategically considered. To your point, therefore, they're looking at things like not just increasing conversion rate, but time to market, reducing returns, et cetera, et cetera. So yes, I'm excited to see that this as a category is being elevated within the organization. And like you said, with your inquiries with customers and me with conversations as well with our customers and prospects, we're seeing much higher level interest for sure. All right. Anything else, Amanda, on that one?
I was just going to add is part of the why now, in addition to what you've said, which is absolutely true on that uncertainty, which we saw the need to adapt and be resilient during the pandemic, and there's certainly continued fallouts for that. It's also about where the opportunity is to create and be creative. And so much of our research and our client interest is related to what is going to be our marketplace strategy? How can we take advantage of new opportunities? There's upcoming questions about what the opportunity is going to be with metaverse commerce as an example. And so we're also seeing that these investments in PIM, we are seeing clients take a more future fit, future oriented look at this. It isn't just something that's going to help us execute on our strategy today, but by having this as a part of our architecture from a PIM perspective, it's going to help us adapt much more quickly as new channels emerge, as what constitutes product information in clients' mind, including videos, lifestyle content, that we're going to be able to better respond to those upcoming changes as well.
So that's great news. PIM and PXM, being seen and elevated within the organization as a more strategic thing or things within the organization from leadership. But there's some things that are kind of tough still. And that goes to the second insight, which we have, which is that organizations continue to struggle with the different aspects of managing the different types of data that they have when it comes to their product. So Amanda, tell us a little bit more about what you found from this part of the survey.
Yeah, this part of the survey wasn't so surprising and is always a little bit reassuring, being someone in the space for the job security around product information management. But was really interesting, I think, especially where we did this study looking at different levels of maturity. The data we're showing here includes all levels of maturity, and across all the respondents, more than half struggled with each and every phase of managing product data that we asked about. So here, it might not be a light bulb going off, but perhaps just a reassurance that you're not alone, that this is really hard to do. Even the basics of understanding where your product data lives across your enterprise, that is no easy task for most organizations. There may be spreadsheets floating around. There might be workflows being managed out of emails. You've got ERP, you've got PLM, you're collecting data from suppliers, from data pools. Just even knowing what all the sources of product information are can be a pretty daunting challenge in and of itself. And I think that's what we saw here, is that no matter where you're at in your PXM maturity journey, there are challenges that are just pervasive when it comes from managing product information. And as the number of products for most organizations, number of SKUs, number of channels served continues to grow, the scale is one of those challenges that we see affecting each and every stage of managing product information. We also see challenges related to resource availability. PIM is relevant to IT folks, to marketers, to data managers, to heads of CX, to heads of MDM, master data management. And no one across any of the roles that PIM helps supports has more time to do more manual work or chase down or do the same task over and over to support various channels or different sales teams or things like that. So that resource availability is a constant challenge. Understanding the right metrics, right? There's a lot of information within the organization. How do you measure what is quality product content? How do you look across, even if you've got an idea of what those metrics are, they live across different systems, whether it's how products are selling against certain channels, where you may have a lot of influx of calls to your customer support service that may indicate that there's a challenge or an issue with your product information, to negative reviews. How do you bring those together to be able to inform your product information strategy? Having the proper tooling, I mentioned that spreadsheets are still pretty pervasive in this space. That doesn't scream automation, that doesn't scream collaboration when it comes to enabling effective product information management strategies. And then that oversight, and we had the very positive data that senior leaders recognize the importance of product information, but that oversight into the full flow of information from wherever a product might get created to wherever there may be feedback from a customer. That's a very disjointed journey at a lot of enterprises. And there's not a single role that has insight most times into that full journey. So when we look at the trouble here, from localizing content to managing scale, to understanding the impact on customers, I'm not surprised that we see 50+% of respondents struggling at each of these phases.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it was certainly very insightful, but like you said, at the same time, not surprising when you sort of take away the covers and see what's going on within the organizations. The level of complexity is there, and we all acknowledge that, and this is just reaffirming that. So if you're watching this and feeling like you're overwhelmed with all the different sources of product information and content and assets, we hear you. I'd like to unpack a couple of those things myself, especially the ones that were slightly higher in the total percentage there. So when it comes to dealing with scale, yes, we've been hearing this a lot. The catalog itself and growing that and providing greater assortment of products is becoming a differentiator for many of these brands and retailers. I think back to when Chewy.com first started, and it was just about pet food. today and very quickly, soon after their launch, it is everything to do with your pets, including medications. That's an example of that expansion that organizations are seeing in terms of the number of SKUs they need to be able to manage across a different variety of categories as well. M&A has been happening and will probably continue actually as we go into a period of economic uncertainty. So there are all new product lines that need to be taken into account, not just the systems and the people, but that catalog as well. When it comes to the channel, yeah, every channel is unique. And so managing those can be complex. Some are automated, some aren't, and are still requiring you to deal with spreadsheets, as you were saying, Amanda. So some have very strict requirements, some less so. And in many cases, the way that those different channels are managed within the organization can be siloed. So now is a great opportunity as part of looking at PXM as a best practice and Forrester's maturity model to take a look to see how can we better align and bring together our people and processes so we can look at those channels holistically and therefore measure their impact. And speaking of which, a couple of approaches. So if you're in that high percentage there of 57% or so who are struggling with measuring the impact of that product data that's going out to the market and those product experiences, one example is one of our customers who are in the tools manufacturing space, and they are an omni-channel brand as well. They're actually tying quality to the completeness and quality of the data itself, and actually measuring revenue and business impact based on increasing the quality and the completeness of the data that gets shared. And they've seen a significant impact there when they get things to that A+ rating with quality and completeness. The other one is to take a look at closed loop analytics as well. So we have a customer, Melvin and Hamilton, you can read about them on the Akeneo website, who are working with a partner of ours to actually tie performance metrics back to changes that they make in product data. So for example, if they're seeing return rates for a particular product going up, they will take a look at the product data to see what might have to change so that people are better informed about the decisions they make on buying products and therefore less likely to return. So a couple approaches to take, and there are means to be able to help you out with that. So third finding, I think we have here, Amanda, is all around the mature organizations themselves. And what we're seeing is that mature organizations are showing this shift in their approach of how they're managing data. Can you talk more about this one, Amanda? This was a good one.
Yeah, this was one of my favorite things that we put into this study, and also to get the data back on. And it's probably one of the areas where we saw the biggest difference between what leaders or the highest level of maturity are doing differently than those that are still at the earlier phases of PXM maturity. And that's that 96% of the PXM leaders agreed that, or said that this statement describes their organization very accurately. 96% said that their organization structures its product data aligned to the needs of its customers and not mastered to the organization. And number one, why I love this is because I have not seen data to support this. I think we've been feeling this shift. It's something that you can kind of sense working with firms that are likely, if we put them through this maturity model, to end up on the leaders. One of the things that they're likely to do differently. But I haven't seen any data to back this up. So I was really excited to get this. And then also it does represent a fundamental shift in the process, the practice, the process, the function of managing product information. It really represents that shift from product information management being an inside out process practice, meaning that I'm putting my data and organizing my data across my enterprise for how I use the data, to this more outside in view, which is we're going to structure our data to support the best flexibility and the best content that serves our customers' needs. We're not going to put in and think through our hierarchy or taxonomy or our attributes in terms of how we talk internally within the enterprise, but to be best aligned to what a consumer might be looking for. Whether it's a hiking backpack for certain trails in certain part of the United States would be very different than what someone might be searching for if they're looking for a pack in certain parts of Europe, for example. How can you best align and optimize that content to, number one, win the search, but also be aligned to a customer's expectations? And I think that this represents that fundamental shift in the way data is managed in PXM leaders than what we see or traditionally see from PIM, which is, by the way, not a new function or category, but we are seeing a lot of companies that are more recent adopters of PIM exactly as they attempt to overcome challenges related to scale, wanting to have the right tools to support teams, needing to support more teams, needing to send content, to send products across more channels. So I love that we've got the data on this and that it's also very tightly related to where a lot of the opportunity, where a lot of our clients at Forrester are focused, and that's figuring out a way to take better advantage of the explosion of new channels and opportunity and be able to quickly pivot and adapt and sell through those channels where their customers expect to be able to interact with the brands that are most relevant to them. Having the data organized in this way from the outside in perspective is a direct support of and recognition that it's not just about managing data, it's about supporting experiences. And so even though this is a very data management focused data point when you read it, in order to actually take this approach, it gets much broader than just the technology or the technical aspects of managing product information. It really does represent so much of the characteristics of what it means to be a PXM leader in terms of the senior level of buy-in, senior stakeholder buy-in in a PXM strategy. You can't do this without a very senior level of support and a business case that ties to the product experience outcomes. You can't do this without investing in the right tools and the right architecture, because product information is just one part of product experience. You can't do this without supporting a broad range of roles within your enterprise. So you need the processes and the tools to help them collaborate and have that central repository for product information to collaborate within. And then you also can't do this if you don't understand how to measure what is the right way to structure that data that's going to have the most impact on our customers. So it's really representative, I think, of all of the tenets that really stand out for PXM leaders.
I agree. This was my favorite too. And you took the words out of my mouth, Amanda, with respect to this outside in thinking. You know, PXM as a set of best practices with people and process and technology isn't just about doing all those things well or doing more of them. It's actually taking a look at each one of those and thinking about how can we deliver the best customer experience for everybody that we need to work with at any particular touch point, whether that is a digital one or in a store or a human-to-human interaction as well. They are thinking about all of these and bringing them together in a very holistic and cohesive way and determining, yes, that's how we can measure performance and impact, by looking at those things. So it's great to see, like you said, we too have never seen this data point before. And it's great to see that those leaders are truly taking that approach, and they're the ones who are going to win for sure. Excellent. The report has got so many other great insights and research points. You all are just going to have to go get it. But for now, Amanda, rather than us continuing going down to the report, what are some next steps that you would advise everybody to take who's watching this?
I would definitely recommend going through the report because it is rich with, we've got a lot of great data points. It was difficult to narrow down to just the three, and we kind of cheated on the second one to make it fit. Three of the key findings to go through here. So definitely recommend that and trying to gauge your maturity level as well to understand where your starting point is. But I think one of the great things about this maturity model in the way that it's structured, again, looking at a holistic set of competencies, is on the one hand, it may seem really overwhelming. You may be recognizing that you don't have the budget, you don't have the resources, you may not be in a senior enough position to feel you can enact this change. But looking through the different areas that we looked at in the maturity model, that actually gives a lot of opportunity. There are some low-hanging fruit in there whether it's the way you think about collaboration, whether it's the way you think about what are some of the metrics you might look to better perform in your own role, or what is the right starting point if your organization is on a high level digital transformation journey. If you're recognizing that this is one of the things holding you back, to start to build the business case to invest in this area that at first glance might not be the sexiest, hottest topic that's out there right now. But again, it's one of those sources of fuel and able to actually execute on a lot of those hot topics right now. So I think that, as a next step, there's a lot of different areas that we look at as a part of maturity. Don't be overwhelmed. That means there's a lot of opportunity to find what's the right and immediate starting point for your organization.
Absolutely. I follow that recommendation of getting hold of the report, go through it, digest it, and share some of the findings with your teams there. And if you've got questions about the report or want to explore how it makes sense for your organization, and you're a Forrester customer, definitely reach out to your Forrester rep so you can engage with Amanda and the rest of the analysts there to learn more about how it applies to you. Or if you'd like to actually learn more about how you as an organization, or maybe as an individual, are doing with your maturity today, and maybe some specific recommendations for you, you can take the Akeneo PXM Maturity Assessment. This is a self-guided assessment, so you can see where you land. And not only will it give you a score that you can then compare to your peers in the Forrester report, but it will give you some next step recommendations for you to be able to take as well. And the Akeneo team will be happy to follow up with you on that. So feel free to reach out to us or get us through the website. So Amanda, thank you very much. Any closing words before we let everybody go?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for having me again. This is a topic that I love to talk about. So thanks for the opportunity there. And I'd say, one of the things just to keep in mind is, we didn't touch on this, but across this landscape, there's a lot happening. I'm probably guilty of using 10 acronyms myself throughout this webinar that can get pretty confusing at times. But, I think is the way to think about PXM as it relates to what you might be hearing from technologies in your own alphabet soup within your architecture in the enterprise, is that product experience is really the outcome that you're trying to drive. And that's the number one thing to keep in mind as you think about what are the right metrics, who should be involved, what are the technologies we need. It's all of those things that combine to deliver great product experiences.
I 100% agree. Everybody out there wants to deliver exceptional product experiences, of course. But it's not something that you're going to be able to do overnight. It's going to be a journey. And it's a journey for all of us as well, including a team of Forrester and Akeneo as well. We're part of that journey too. So going on a journey means knowing where you're at today. And so this study and this report is a great way to find out where you stand today and where you could potentially go on that journey, and define your own North Star for it. And we wish you luck on that journey, of course, and we're here to help you. So Amanda, that was super cool, super insightful. I'm so glad to be able to get together again with you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
All right, everybody, take care, stay well. We'll see you soon.